Now we are getting reports this hour that handheld radios used by Hezbollah have detonated across Lebanon, including...
The world appears to be spiraling into disorder.
The blasts happened northwest of Moscow, nearly 500 kilometers deep into Russian territory. Ukraine says its drones hit a warehouse.
In Gaza, at least 8 Palestinians, including 5 children, have been killed in an Israeli strike on a school that was sheltering displaced people east of Gaza.
In a time of growing uncertainty, fostering dialogue between nations has never been more critical. In this spirit, Beijing recently hosted the Xiangshan Forum, a platform launched in 2006 to tackle global security challenges. This year's forum brought together over 1,800 experts and military representatives from more than 100 countries and international organizations, including participants from the United States, Russia, Israel, and Ukraine. In today's episode, my colleague Zhao Yunfei joins me to explore how this forum could contribute to global stability and examine China's approach to addressing the crisis our world is facing. It's Thursday, September the 19th. So, Yunfei, this is not the first year for you to attend the Xiangshan Forum. And what do you think are the differences that's taking place for this year's forum?
Yeah, this is my second year attending the Beijing Xiangshan Forum. The last year was actually the 10th, and this year is the 11th. And for these 2 years, because these 2 years forum are the first time after the pandemic, so we'll see an increasing amount of participants. But also we'll see more participants compared with last year. This year we have delegations from over 100 countries and organizations coming to Beijing. Interesting enough, before the forum, they say it's 90, and then as the forum approached, they fixed the number and raised the number to 100. As you can tell, this forum is gathering an increasing amount of participation as well as anticipation to it. And I spoke with the organizers, and they say that it's actually not that important to count down the number of participants, because if you see that compare Beijing Xiangshan Forum with other security forums in the world, there are several security forums in the world. They really don't focus on the number of participants, but they focus on who is attending the forum. And the Beijing Xiangshan Forum has its very unique perspective because they have gathered a lot of participants from global south countries. And a lot of them really have their saying at the Beijing Xiangshan Forum. I think that's one of the unique point. Another special point that the Beijing Xiangshan Forum that has is its tone. If you listen to the tone, or if you sit in to the discussions, there's no fight. There's no, competitions. Idea of, the crossover of the ideas. The general atmosphere the forum is quite harmonious. It's quite usual. It's not tit for tat. So I think this is another perspective that Beijing Xiangshan Forum is trying to pursue, is that we get together not to quarrel, not to fight, but we get together to seek for common ground and seek for cooperation. So we will be able to see a very, very friendly atmosphere here in the Beijing Xiangshan Forum.
So the participants is more important than the number of attendees at this type of forum. You brought up delegations from Global South. We'll get into that topic later. You also mentioned that Xiangshan Forum is not the only conference that's focused on global security challenges around the world. There are other conferences of a similar nature from Munich, from Singapore, and how do you think that this forum in Beijing differ from the other ones of the similar nature? Also, why does China need to launch its own security conference?
Well, that's a very interesting point, because I've been to the Shangri-La Dialogue also twice. So every June, I went to Singapore and attend the Shangri-La Dialogue. It's a totally Western-driven agenda setting. So basically, for the Shangri-La Dialogue, they will give a platform for the U.S. delegation. They will also give the platform for the Chinese delegation. But if you look at the order of the presentation, they will give more important spot to the U.S. delegation. And in order to make it balanced, they will give the Chinese delegation, usually the Chinese defense minister, to have the keynote speech in the very last day. But if you look at the Xiangshan Forum, the Chinese side really give the platform for a lot of countries. I said in one of the meetings when the defense minister of Sri Lanka say that it's unbelievable that China really give the platform to them as they call themselves a smaller country. But actually, from the Chinese perspective, they're not the smaller country. They equal is kind of the theme that the Beijing Xiangshan Forum is trying to pursue. A lot of people would also ask, hey, here is the US delegation also participating the forum. But if you look at the level of the participant from the US delegation, we have US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense. So the level is not there to give a speech. But certainly, the US would also have its own engagement with the participants at the Xiangshan Forum.
Okay, so it doesn't matter where you come from to countries, doesn't matter how big or small they are, they will have an equal chance to voice their concerns at the Xiangshan Forum. With that being said, forum focused on global security challenges, but there will be a heavy focus on the large countries. For example, the interaction between China and the US. Because this year, the US Department of Defense has sent a higher ranking delegation to attend the Xiangshan Forum in Beijing. And what are the interactions between these two countries at the forum, and what have been the issues that have been discussed between them?
Well, the United States has dispatched its Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Michael Chase, to Beijing. There's a small side story which the media, the press at present, really covered on that, is that an interaction between the participant from China, Lieutenant General He Lei, is the former vice president of the PLA Academy of Military Sciences, and they have they cross over with each other at a cafe in the Xiangshan Forum. That was a chance encounter, but turned out to be a very nice talk. He Lei said that he showed the U.S. delegate a badge of the Academy of Military Sciences of the PLA. And then the badge has a very special design, and it has a pattern of the Great Wall. And probably from the US philosophy, they won't be able to understand what the Great Wall means. But that's a very basic ideology that China is holding when it comes to security, is the idea of being defensive. So all the Chinese, security concern and the construction of the PLA is based on this ideology of actively defense itself. And also on the badge, there is an olive branch, which is means for peace, and that's the common language across the globe. Lieutenant General He, I know him in person. So I know him, he's a very nice guy that always carry gifts with him. So as long as he coming across with very special guests, and he will give away little gifts, for example, a badge. So I think that would really build a friendship between the Chinese and US delegation. The US side is really at a very low key participating in the Xiangshan Forum. CGTN tried to reach out to them and for an interview and got rejected. We don't know the reason why, but the fact that they are there, it's also an opportunity to have a dialogue between the two sides. And before the Beijing Xiangshan Forum, I also got a chance to speak with Lieutenant General He Lei, and I asked him about a recent communication between Vice Chairman Zhang Yunfei, the Vice Chairman of the Central Military Commission, with Jake Sullivan. And Mr. He said that it's a great conversation, and it is always better to meet than not, and it is better to talk than not to talk. But there's also an old saying in China that we should not only listen to what they say, but also watch what they do. So China has been long accusing the U.S. actions in a lot of issues. On the one side, seeking for common ground, but on the other side, provoking the situation.
So it sounds like Lieutenant General He is always packed with souvenirs and gifts to build an amicable relationship at the Security Forum. And earlier, you brought up that every country at the Xiangshan Forum, they will get an equal chance of voicing their concerns. And this time in Beijing, representatives from Russia, Ukraine, and NATO, they were actually able to exchange their opinions in the same room, which is very different from other security meetings that may miss out on the voice from Russia. So this time at the Xiangshan Forum, what is the approach that these representatives took to address the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
I think that fulfills China's philosophy of making sure that all the parties' security concern is being taken care of. There is a scenario in the world that there is a forum that the voice of Russians are being ignored, given the
Right.
current Russia-Ukraine conflict. But all the time, not only just between Russia and Ukraine, we also have the representative from Israel and the United States. So the forum really give a fair, equal amount of invitation to all the parties, even though those parties are engaged with all of the conflicts. So let's speak about Russian-Ukraine conflict. I hosted a forum, a panel discussion on the Europe security. I have two guests, one
Okay.
Chinese guest, another is a guest from Ukraine. His name is Oleksandr Chai, and he's the president of the Grand Toronto, Ukraine. What makes his title unique is he's the former first deputy foreign minister of Ukraine. And he was a third member of Ukraine's negotiating team in Istanbul back in 2022, when Russia and Ukraine is almost reaching a common point during their discussion. So he emphasized in the panel that Ukraine is really paying close attention to its security concerns. And in that respect, China is playing a very proactive role. And so China is a very important country, and they hope that China can play a better role. And the initiative for the peaceful settlement proposed by China, it's very helpful when it comes to a political settlement between Russia and Ukraine. And also, the Chinese guest is Mr. Cui Hongjian, professor of Academy of Regional and Global Governance from Beijing Foreign Studies University. And then he said that China wants to find a peaceful solution, but China will never take any side when it comes to resolve any conflicts. So I think that's the perspective that why China has gained respect when it comes to peaceful negotiation and crisis settlement.
You actually had the chance to host a session on security concerns in Europe. And what about in the Middle East, the Israel-Palestine conflict? How has this topic been covered at the Xiangshan Forum?
Well, I think there's also a circulation from, also spoke with a lot of Chinese participants who is coming to the Xiangshan Forum. They really are talking about, because Israel-Palestine conflict, along with the Russian-Ukraine conflicts, those are the crises that are ongoing, the two major conflicts that the world is facing. So a lot of the Chinese participants would really emphasize that Chinese side has done a lot of effective work to ease those conflicts.
Right.
China has not won a war and insists on resolving conflicts and disputes between countries through peaceful negotiations. That's one perspective. Another is that the sovereignty of all parties in the conflict should be respected, and their security concerns should be guaranteed. And China has been proposing idea of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security idea, and also promoting peace and promoting talks. That's also the solution for cooling down the situation. And China has been withholding the idea of no escalation of fighting and no provocation by any party.
Yeah, and apart from these two hotspots of security concerns in the world, there are also potential concerns in Asia. There has been a growing number of provocations to China these days. For example, the Philippines in the South China Sea. And actually, just during the Xiangshan Forum, there were two German warships that sailed through the Taiwan Straits on September the 13th. So, as the Security Forum held by a major country in the Asia-Pacific region, and also the target of many of the recent provocations, what's the perspective from Xiangshan Forum on the stability and the security concerns in Asia-Pacific region?
You mentioned about the situation in the Taiwan Strait, and I also got a chance to host a discussion called Security in Asia Pacific. By the time I was hosting that, the situation of the Taiwan Strait, we still don't know the news in the Taiwan Strait. But certainly this is something related to the foreign interference. So we discuss about the foreign interference when it comes to the security in the Asia Pacific. One of the major issue is the presence of NATO and AUKUS in the Asia Pacific. where Major General Nie Songlai, the research fellow of the Institute of War of Study at PLA Academy of Military Sciences, saying that NATO is creating camp confrontation in the Asia Pacific, and that will also give the platform for the countries from outside of the region to get engaged with the security issues with a mechanism perspective to get engaged with Asia Pacific, and that really gives a threat to the Asia Pacific. Speaking of the security in Asia Pacific, he said that it's a sensitive issue, but Asia Pacific has been sharing a long-lasting, prosperous development, and that can really thanks to the cooperation, peaceful cooperation among all the countries. But he also raised the concern, speaking of the relationship between China and the Philippines. It's been the 49th anniversary of the diplomatic ties of the two countries. So if you look at the history, that's the two sides has been upholding a peaceful cooperation and friendly cooperation. But the current South China Sea issue could sabotage such relationship, according to Major General Nie. So it's really a time to address those issues. We cannot avoid those issues. And it's time to conduct peaceful dialogue and negotiation when it comes to South China Sea issue. Another guest in the panel is the ambassador of I Gusti Angwa Wasaka Puja, executive director of ASEAN Institute for Peace and Reconciliation, also the former permanent representative of Indonesia to the United Nations, have been raising the idea of ASEAN centrality. And he said that when it comes to resolving disputes, ASEAN should play its role as ASEAN centrality. ASEAN should play an active role, and that really, to some extent, oppose the idea of foreign interference, as we just mentioned.
And from the beginning of our conversation, you brought up the global South countries, which actually represents over half of the attending countries and international organizations at the Xiangshan Forum this year. And this concept, Global South, is also featured throughout this forum in Beijing. So what role do Global South countries play in addressing global security concerns? And when we talk about this concept of Global South countries, how do their perspective differ from the Global North countries?
Well, if you're speaking of the Global South countries, a lot of them are developing countries. So if you look at the issue of famine, if you look at the issue of security, well, less development really means security challenges. So it's very usually in the bigger narrative, the Global North would have its saying. But now the Beijing Xiangshan Forum is seeking a narrative that the Global South really is facing challenges when it comes to security. So they have to speak out. They have to have the platform. And the Beijing Xiangshan Forum is providing this platform for the Global South to raise its own security concerns. So in this perspective, the Beijing Xiangshan Forum has played an active role. On the very last day of the forum, there is a plenary session that really focuses on the global security initiative. That's a speech given by the Chinese Vice Foreign Minister Chen Xiaodong. And he says that the global security initiative is really addressing the issue that there are some countries in the world who are seeking absolute security or unilateral security, and that is the thing that the world cannot accept. But each country should take the cause of legitimate security concern of all the parties. So that's why Mr. Chen said that the global security initiative have three unique aspects. It underpins logic that mankind have the same future, and it advocates the idea of equal and that ordinary multipolar world. And also, it encouraged all the parties to respond proactively to the changing dynamics of the world's current situation. I think that's the wisdom of the Global Security Initiative, that a lot of the Global South countries would really trying to pursue and praise the Global Security Initiative and also praise this platform so that they will be able to speak out in an international stage.
So Xiangshan Forum is really giving a platform for many of the countries to voice their concerns that previously didn't have such a platform. Thank you very much for speaking with us, Yunfei.
Thank you very much.
这是共享平等的舞台，在这里应该没有369等，
In his opening speech at the Xiangshan Forum, Chinese Defense Minister Dong Jun emphasized one word repeatedly: equality.
都应平等地参与国际事务。
The term surfaced 5 times in just about a minute, underscoring a central theme of the forum. This repetition was not just rhetoric, it was a powerful reminder of the fundamental principle that should guide how nations engage with one another. That brings us to the end of this episode of Deep Dive. If you enjoyed what you just heard, don't forget to follow us on your podcast platform. Just search for Deep Dive. You can also leave comments to let us know what you want to learn about China and the world. This episode is brought to you by me, Li Yunqi, and my colleagues Zhang Zhang and Qi Zhi. Special thanks to CGTN reporter Zhao Yunfei. I'll see you in the next one.